Welcome, everybody, to 5D University, and today's topic is balanced harmonics and the divine traits of a God self. So we've gone through the different vibrational frequencies and the ego programmings, and so the ego programmings and the lower thoughts and lower emotions all are going to fall on that vibrational scale of under 200. And under 200 is a life draining state, right? Now, when you get above 200, you start anchoring in the divine traits of God, the divine traits of a God self. And so we went over some of those, patience, neutrality, courage, passion, understanding, joy, love, all those kind of things, right? But I'm going to go through the list of the divine traits, the divine masculine traits and the divine feminine traits. Now remember, we all have an inner masculine and an inner feminine. So the divine masculine traits don't just apply to masculine vessels, and the divine feminine traits don't just apply to feminine vessels. So what we're moving out of is part of what has kept us in those lower vibrational states, which, as we talked about, creates pain, illness, and disease, and creates pain and suffering, is when we're living in those lower states and frequencies. And so when we start to raise our frequency, we're naturally going to start coming into a balance. The dysfunction on the planet is that the programmings kept everybody in a box. Everybody had to be labeled and in a box, and you had to fit some certain criteria for that box, right? And we've seen how this has changed and gone through evolutions over time. We see how historically masculine were taught and programmed to be in the lower masculine energy. They were almost completely cut off from their feminine. So this was power over, this was violence, this was dominance. This is like the very, when we think of like the historic days where there was a lot of war and there was just a lot of conflict and things like that. And masculine were really programmed to be in this very violent, dominant state, right? And feminine were taught to pretty much be very docile, very quiet, do what you're told, care for everything, care for children, care for, people in the tribe. And so they were really kept in these boxes. And then as we kind of have gone through evolution, then it was a little bit different, right? Because as we started to evolutionize, the collective consciousness as a whole started to rise a little bit out of such the very brute and primitive states. And so they started to become more intellectual. There was more kind of things like philosophy and art and teaching, astronomy, science, these sort of things. But then we developed all new programmings, right? Then the masculine were basically programmed into complete left brain thinking, which is logical, analytical. This is where we have this mentality of like, we have to prove it. What's the science? What's the numbers? What's the proof? It's very left brain analytical. And the feminine kind of fell into this still very over feminized state where there was a lot of feminine who were more into the arts, right? They were working with herbs, they were working with alchemy, they were working with the arts, that sort of thing. They didn't really allow feminine into the intellectual space. And vice versa, there wasn't as many masculine who were more into the artistic, intuitive realms. So we've kind of had, all of us have been separated, and we've been operating in completely different spaces. So the key with entering 5D and entering those higher frequencies is that you start to balance out. You have an inner masculine and an inner feminine, and you can't suppress either of those sides. That's what creates dysfunction. And that's what ultimately creates this kind of battle between masculine and feminine, where they don't understand one another. And that's because they've been both programmed to be basically at opposite sides of the spectrum, not in the middle, where they both should be able to harmonize quite easily. So balanced harmonics, in true reality, is every masculine vessel will hold 51% masculine energy and 49% feminine energy. So they've got 2% more of masculine energy, which, because they're in a masculine vessel, and for feminine, the balanced harmonics is 51% feminine, 49% masculine. So that everybody is working in harmony. Most of the collective now, you'll see that we're all very imbalanced within. So you'll have masculine who are hyper masculine. So they may be carrying 80 to 90% masculine energy and maybe only 10 to 20% feminine energy. They're very disconnected. Same with feminine. A feminine could be carrying 80 to 90% feminine energy, but her masculine's only at 10 to 20%. So there's an imbalance, and this can go vice versa as well, right? There might be a masculine who has over feminine energy, not enough masculine. And same for a feminine vessel, could be over masculine, not enough feminine. And again, this comes from programming, this comes from wounding, this comes from the lower vibrational states, and it also comes from the mind's need to label everything and to fit everything into a box. It keeps us from being whole, because we're not just one thing, right? So there is a full list of the divine traits on our website at 5dfulldisclosure.org under the library tab. There is an entire document that lists all of the divine traits. So if you're going through the ego programmings and dissolving those, and you're looking to really begin anchoring in the divine traits consciously, you can use all of those traits and use them in your affirmations in the I am format. It's a really simple practice that just helps you start embodying those traits and speaking them out loud. So you can reference that guide if you need to. But here are the divine masculine traits. And so this is not a complete list, but these are the core ones that represent the divine masculine energy. Worthiness. We've been taught to be very unworthy, and this has led to the idea that we have to work really, really hard in order to earn something, right? That we're not worthy of something unless we have literally ran ourselves into the ground for it. Of course, there is an aspect of we have to be committed to things, right? And dedicated. And hard work is a divine trait in a sense, but not in the way that we think of it in 3D, right? It's more of a commitment and dedication, not how much physical energy you are, putting out, or what you are doing, how many tasks you've accomplished. That is not the way that 5D is. So, but worthiness is really knowing that all humans are worthy of all that love is, right? And all that love is encompasses everything that is divine. Love, joy, happiness, freedom. All human beings are worthy of that, of abundance, right? So worthiness is a divine masculine trait that we have to anchor in. Divine intelligence. So we're moving from the third dimensional idea of what intelligence is, which was very much based on what are your degrees? What are your qualifications? How big of words do you use? It's very 3D, and divine intelligence is really meaning where you have a balance between your left and right brain. And this is also what's going to come in with balanced harmonics, being able to have full access to our brain, not just being stuck on the left and not just being stuck on the right, but using those together. And that's really what divine intelligence is. It's being able to be tapped in and to be able to have the capability to make right action decisions, right? That's what divine intelligence does. It makes the right action choice in the moment. It doesn't need to think about it. It doesn't need to ask everyone's opinion. It doesn't need to analyze it. It just knows what right action is in that moment. And so divine intelligence and right action are really intertwined. And so this is relearning what is right action, right? And right action is going to come naturally with this balance. It is what is the correct, highest choice, decision, action in this moment. And that naturally starts to come in when you dissolve the programmings and you start anchoring in these divine traits. Patience is a divine masculine trait. Patience to allow things to unfold, not forcing. Force is such a lower masculine energy. The true divine masculine has pure patience. They trust, they know that things will unfold, they just keep at it. Right? And they're patient. They're not forcing. They're not trying to make something happen. They have patience. Trust. So another key ingredient. Have to be able to trust. If you don't trust, that's when you start to control. Also a very lower masculine trait. Inner strength. Inner strength takes time to develop, but having inner strength means that no matter what is happening in our lives or what we're experiencing, we have a core solid foundation of inner strength of ourselves, and it's not reliant on the external world. And that usually comes with a lot of tests and challenges to really anchor in inner strength. Courage is a divine masculine trait. When we don't have courage, what happens is we make choices based out of fear rather than based out of love. And when we do that, we're choosing weakness. When we choose the fearful route, we make a choice that's based on what we're afraid of. We are operating on the opposite spectrum of love. And so we're operating out of a weakness, right? Courage is the ability to choose love over fear in every experience and opportunity. Integrity. This is a big one. Integrity encompasses many things. It's not, I think a lot of people in 3D, we have this misconception of what integrity is, and that's because it's based on a 3D system. So true integrity means that you are staying true to not only yourself, your true self, but you are staying true to your purpose. You are in integrity with what you say, right? This is one of the biggest ones. If you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it, it's completely out of integrity. And people do it all the time. They do it all the time. So learning integrity really comes from being really conscious of what we say we're going to do and being in integrity with what ourselves, our souls are guiding us to do. If you keep getting a ping or an urge to do something, and this could be start a project, this could be you just keep getting the ping that you need to take some sort of action and you're not doing it, and you're just like, oh, maybe I'll do it another time, or oh, I'm not really sure about it yet. You're out of integrity with yourself because your inner self is saying, hey, take this action. Hey, do this thing, call this person, start this project, whatever it may be. So integrity has everything to do with being true to yourself, right? Honor is another one. Honoring things is really honoring the sacredness of everyone and everything, honoring the God within everyone and everything. Truth, that's a big one. Truth and transparency. It's a divine masculine trait. Omitting things or lying about things or misconstruing words. Obviously, we see it in 3D all the time. And it's just a lower programming. Consistency. Divine masculine are consistent. And this is another trait we all have to anchor these in, right? And consistency is, if you, this is the best famous example is the joke that everybody has about New Year's resolutions, right? And the joke is kind of always that everyone will make a New Year's resolution, and 3-4 weeks after, they kind of drop the ball. It's because they have not anchored in the divine trait of consistency. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to do the same things forever, all the time, right? We're going to shift through different things. So, like if you have a routine or you have spiritual disciplines in place that are really good for you, they really help you, stay consistent with them. Once you get to the point where something is no longer working for you, you've gotten all you can out of that particular practice or discipline or whatever it is, then you can cultivate new practices, new disciplines, new whatever, new routines, but stay consistent with them. That's the key. Dedication. Dedication is a divine masculine trait as well. When someone's not dedicated, they're half-ass. Half-ass is a huge programming. You have to be dedicated to your purpose, to your craft, to your service. You have to be dedicated to something. Be dedicated to healing yourself. Be dedicated to being the best version of yourself. Be dedicated to your craft and what it is you love to do. Dedication is a divine trait. Perseverance. Not giving up just because a challenge comes, not giving up just because something's not working out the way you thought it was. Those are usually where we get our biggest tests of perseverance. And the next one is tenacity, and those kind of go hand in hand. Tenacity pushes through tests and challenges because it knows that it's capable, right? Nothing that presents to us as an experience is meant to punish us, and there's nothing that occurs in our experience that we are not capable of mastering. Accountability. This is a key one. Accountability. The lower masculine energy will do everything but take accountability. It's always someone else's fault. It is always a blame. It is always a projection. A true divine masculine accountability, which again we all have, is taking accountability even when it's not your fault, even when you did not create the situation, right? Because when you take accountability for everything around you, you are not only helping to clear that energy for the collective, but you are taking your own power back by saying, well, hey, you know what? I didn't do that. I wasn't the one who created this issue, but I'm going to take accountability for it anyways. And I'm going to make sure that I dissolve anything within me that may have contributed to this issue. And I'm going to make sure that I do better next time, no matter what. And that's just a true divine trait. That is the way that we help transform collective consciousness, and it's how we take our power back. Being proactive, taking initiative is a divine masculine trait. Waiting for someone to tell you what to do, that's a weakness that was programmed into us. Or procrastinating as well. Divine willpower. So divine willpower is a key trait for us all. And that really means that you're in line with divine will. So you have the divine willpower to execute and to take action and to overcome and to master anything that you put your heart to and anything that comes into your experience. That divine willpower flows through you. The lower energy of this is self-willpower. It is when, and this is how predominantly the masculine energy has functioned on the planet, which is that self-willpower is very dominating, and it essentially says, I will do absolutely anything to get what I want. That's self-willpower. Divine willpower is, I will do absolutely anything to serve the highest good. Big difference, right? Empowerment, key. Being humble. The programming of arrogance, super deep, as a masculine programming, being humble, being kind, having passion. When we lack passion, our inner masculine has just not been balanced out, because we naturally, as divine beings, as a God self, have a ton of passion. Our passions are our compass. They guide us to what our purpose is. And so when we can't find passion and we're maybe struggling with that, that's usually a sign to really, you have to get more in tune with your inner self. Maybe there's some things to clear out. Maybe there's some healing to do, something. But the more you come into knowing yourself, the more passion you have. And it's not, and the lower energy of this was anger. And it is also maybe passion focused in the wrong area, directed at the wrong things, right? True passion is passion of service to love, and, fulfilling your purpose. Tolerance is the final divine masculine trait. Intolerance is a programming. It says, I'm right and you're wrong, and I won't tolerate anything that you have to say. I won't tolerate how you're different from me. I won't tolerate your uniqueness. I won't tolerate the fact that you have a different perspective than me. So it's a very deeply ingrained, again, that's all left brain. That's the programmed part of the masculine brain, is that there has to be a right and wrong, and there has to be a black and white, and there has to be a this side and a that side, and it creates intolerance. True divine masculine are tolerant of all, because they understand that everybody is in their own path and their own journey, and we all have different perspectives because we've had different experiences, because we're transforming different programmings. Ultimately, we're all going to reach the same destination, pure whole truth. But in the meantime, tolerance is key. Now we have our divine feminine traits. So these are also for everybody to anchor in. This is not just for feminine. Genuineness and authenticity. In the lower feminine, we're very programmed to kind of construct an image of themselves, because based on the culture and societies that we live in, it's been very heavily programmed on feminine that we have to meet some certain image of ourselves. We have to present ourselves a certain way and be a certain way in order to be accepted, in order to be valued. And so we kind of lost, and this is for everyone, this is for, again, masculine vessels as well. We've lost our authenticity and our genuineness, because it's been so much about putting on the mask and creating an image, that we have to get back to our genuineness, heart-centered. And when we're heart-centered, it really just means that we are able to come back to the heart in every situation. There's going to be times, of course, where, we get triggered, all of those things, right? This is all a normal part of the process. But heart-centeredness means no matter what, you come back to the heart. You come back to love. So even if there's moments where we're in the lower, where we do something, it doesn't matter. Come back to the heart-centeredness. Say, okay, I forgive myself. I forgive this person. Okay. And we just keep coming back to the heart. And that's what leads the way. The problem is when things happen, situations, tests, challenges, all of the life experiences, and we get farther away from the heart. We actually shut the heart down because we don't want to have to feel pain again. We have to keep coming back to the heart. It's a core divine feminine trait. Compassion. Again, so you might notice that if you're a feminine vessel, you may find that, of course, the divine feminine traits might come easily to you, or they're more easily accessible. Some of you may not, and some of the masculine might resonate more with the divine masculine traits as coming more easily to them. Usually the challenge is balancing it out and looking at the traits that we struggle with and really focusing on those. So compassion, especially for a lot of people, is a challenging one, and something that we actually have to really work to embody, because there's so little of it on the planet. Because again, a lot of the feminine traits have been very suppressed. And And we've been cut off a lot from our heart centers. So a lot of these are going to be ones that come in due time, the more we open our hearts and the more we kind of connect to the inner self. Empathy. And empathy is different from sympathy. Sympathy is kind of when you feel bad for another person, which is actually a programming. Sympathy is not actually a real trait. So again, sympathy is when, oh, I feel bad for this. I feel so bad for them. That's sympathy. And really that's just creating victim mentality. Empathy is the true divine quality. And empathy says, I can relate to you, even if I haven't had the same experience as you and what you're going through. I have empathy for you as a human being because I too know how challenging it is. I too know how it feels to be angry or in grief or hurt or whatever it is. And so sympathy is when it's like we can't relate to the person too much, so we're just like, oh, I feel so bad for them, but that's not helping them. That's sharing victim energy with them. Empathy is, I feel you as a fellow human being. And that's healing because it's empowering the person, like, hey, I feel you and I feel your struggle, and you're gonna heal this. You're gonna get through it. Universal love. Universal love is loving all things. And it's being able to hold that universal love, again, no matter what you see outside of you. And this is when universal love, it transcends our very small bubble of our personal experience. A lot of people in 3D, they love their families, they love their children, they love their partners, maybe they love their friends. But if they were to go meet someone random on the street, they would never tell that person they love them, right? They would think that's super weird, but it's not. Because you can't love yourself if you don't love the whole. And you can't love the whole if you don't love yourself. So why we've boxed in love to these very specific dynamics and only people close to us, it's like this big thing in 3D, like to tell someone you love them. And I find that so interesting because it's like we reserve love for certain people. But in true reality, in the fifth dimension, you love all. So it's not weird, and it's also it's more weird that we only associate love with certain people, and we think that it doesn't apply to anyone outside of our close relationships. Kindness, that one's pretty straightforward. Receptivity. And receptivity is a few things. So it's being able to receive, right? A lot of us have blocks to receiving because we're so used to giving, especially feminine. They have trouble receiving, and so they'll actually block their receiving unconsciously. Again, because it goes back to the mentality of you have to earn it. So we all have blocks to receiving. Receptivity is also being able to receive anything, right? So it's being able, if someone calls you out, and when I say call out, like when we call someone out on ego programming, we're doing it with compassion, but we're saying, hey, that behavior is dysfunctional. This is the frequency, right? You're basically letting someone know that their behavior is not in alignment with love, and it's just not acceptable. And a lot of people have trouble receiving that. They will get angry, they will get defensive, they will project back at you. They will say, that's not true, I'm offended, I can't believe, all these things, right? That is indicative of having a block to receptivity, because receiving is not just receiving love and affection and abundance, it's also being able to receive something that you don't like, right? Because anything that gets presented to us in our experience is showing us something. So if we lack receptivity, we're not only blocking love, joy, abundance, all of the things that we do want, we're also blocking all of the things being presented to us that we don't like but are going to teach us something and are going to help us grow. So receptivity, accept, embrace, allow, all things, right? Gratitude. Entitlement is the lower of this, and it's huge. We have been taught not to be grateful for anything, but to be entitled to it. Practicing gratitude is really an art form, and it will change your life in terms of how you feel about yourself, how you feel about everything that you've been blessed with, and realize that gratitude can span all situations, even the worst situations. If we find gratitude in the experience, what is this showing me? All experiences are meant to get us to a higher level, all of them. So when we practice gratitude, even in the situations, again, that we don't like, it'll really change the way that you see things. And it's such a powerful trait to anchor in. So I do recommend really working with the art of gratitude. Nurturing. Most people think women are just nurturing by nature, and that's not always necessarily true. There's been a lot of programming to take away that nurturing aspect of feminine, to make us harder, to make us more masculine. So sometimes we do have to really reconnect with the energy of nurturing. And first and foremost, you have to nurture yourself. If you can't nurture yourself, you cannot nurture anyone else. So nurturing of the self means not criticizing yourself, not nitpicking yourself, not talking down to yourself. Really working on self-love, which is again where the tools and techniques and the self-love disciplines come in. That's a part of nurturing one's self. When you're struggling, treat yourself as if it was a friend or a family member or anybody that was struggling. You would nurture them. But we find the hardest nurturing to do is with ourselves. And if we can anchor that, that will naturally flow with all beings we interact with. Being organic. Being organic is a key one. We have been taught how to be robotic. Organic goes with the flow. Organic means that we are flowing with the energy from day to day. And I know this is hard for a lot of people, especially if you're working a job that is a specific time frame and things like that. It's kind of hard to be organic. But do your best to incorporate the energy of organicness in your daily life. And this just means don't try to plan everything out. Don't try to control and make everything fit in this very linear, robotic way. Allow yourself the organicness. It's the spontaneity of the feminine. Source energy is feminine, and it's spontaneous. It's organic. It doesn't need to be forced. It doesn't need to be planned out. It doesn't need to be made to happen. And it's certainly not linear. So organicness and spontaneity kind of go hand in hand. Joy. Joy is a divine feminine trait. The lower of this, of course, is being very moody, being very pessimistic, complaining, that sort of thing. And joy has to be found within. It will never be found outside of yourself. Trust me on that. And that's what we're doing. It takes a while. I'm not going to sell you rainbows and butterflies. It takes a long while. But eventually, when you start to cultivate your own joy, you get your own empowerment back, because nothing outside of you now can take it from you. It's not dependent. Of course, there's going to be things that might happen that might not make us feel great, but that internal joy will always be able to come through. Pure thought. Pure thought is a divine feminine trait because it accesses the right brain, which is the feminine side. Pure thought comes from the right brain. It does not come from the left brain. The true nature of the way the brain is supposed to work is that both hemispheres are supposed to be joined together, both communicating with one another, right? Up until this point, we've had a severed brain hemisphere, and most of our brain functioning is on the left. Some people do have more access to the brain if they are specifically very creative and things like that. Meditation helps open up the full spectrum of the brain. You probably have also heard that we only access 10 to 20% of our brain, maybe up to 30. We're supposed to have 100% usage. It's not normal. And so when we have 100% usage of our brain, which is what we're working towards, right? The right brain is what connects to the pure thought. It connects to the unlimited possibilities, the etheric, the fifth dimensional frequencies, which is unlimited possibilities, unlimited thought, and it's all higher thought. It's higher thought. It's the thoughts of God, right? And those come into the right brain and they get decoded by the left brain so we can understand them, so we can communicate them. We've been trying to pull thoughts through the left brain, which it won't work. And that's why all we do is spin our wheels in these mental loops going absolutely nowhere. And we wonder why. Because we're trying to access thoughts from the left brain, and the left brain can only decode what it already knows. That's why we go in mental loops, and it never comes to any sort of, there's no conclusion. Any of you who have had that experience, I'm sure we all have, the thought loops, the racing thoughts, and it just goes in circles. It just goes in circles and it never stops because the left brain can only decode what it already knows. The right brain is able to access what it doesn't know. And so that is pure thought, which is higher thought. Transparency. This goes along with the divine masculine trait of truth. And transparency is another form of intimacy. A lot of people think of intimacy purely as physical, but it's not. Transparency is understanding that there is no difference between the internal and the external. They are one and the same. They mirror one another. So when we are transparent, we are able to be vulnerable. We are able to be open. We are able to be receptive. We're not putting up walls because we understand that the internal and the external, there is no difference. The only difference is this vessel that creates some sort of idea that we are separate from the external world, and we're not. So when we're transparent, we allow our internal self to be expressed, to be vulnerable, and we also receive reflections from the outside world to then take in and process and feel into what's being reflected to me. That's transparency. Truth is the verbal expression of that transparency. So they work hand in hand. Self-love, easy enough, okay? Wisdom, okay? Wisdom is actually a divine feminine trait because wisdom comes through experience. It's not an analytical thought process. It's not, you can't learn wisdom. You just can't. You have to experience things in order to gain wisdom, right? So it's not a masculine process. It's a feminine process. Experiencing things, taking in that experience, gaining wisdom, being responsive. Okay, the lower of this is when feminine were taught to, and I mean, hey, I had this programming bad. When I was really, in my 3D life and, obviously not totally awakened yet. I would say I was probably like the silent treatment queen, right? Like that was what I was taught. Like that was the programming that I had, was if I was upset about something, if I couldn't express it, so it was silent treatment. Non-responsive, not going to answer, not going to respond, not going to talk to you. And a lot of feminine do that because it's their way. They're so frustrated internally, right? And this is for all of us, again, not just feminine, but masculine too. We've been stifled in our expression. We feel like we can't express ourselves because either A, we don't know how, because it's so built up and we're just not even sure what we're feeling, or it's not being received. We're being shut down. So you get to a point where you don't know what else to do other than become non-responsive, other than to ignore, block, ghost people. That's a part of the lower programming. The divine feminine trait is responsive. We respond to everything, right? We respond to life as it responds to us. We are interacting and participating actively with life. So this means that it could be as simple as responding to people. Like if there is something that needs to be addressed or something is said to you, you respond rather than react. But this is also just more on a level of, instead of withdrawing from life, we respond to it. We're not trying to hide from life. We're responding to it and we're actively participating with it, right? So that would be the higher. Intuitiveness. So pretty straightforward. We're all intuitive. Full feeling. This also takes a while to get to. Full feeling is the ability to feel all energies. And to be able to have a fully open heart chakra. So this does come with time. Again, this maybe take more time for a masculine vessel because they've been so cut off from the feeling. But this naturally comes in. Being selfless. And in the lower of this, it was the feminine kind of martyr, where we would sacrifice ourselves for others, which only turns into guilt and resentment. It's not divine at all, because selfless doesn't mean you sacrifice yourself for others. It means that you selflessly give, right, in the name of love, but you give to yourself too. So selfless does not mean you're out of the equation. It means you selflessly give of yourself, and you also give back to you. And the final one is non-attached. The lower of this is extreme attachment and codependency. And being non-attached doesn't mean we don't care. It means that we understand the flows of life, that things come and go, and that is the way that life is designed. The universe is not designed to hold on to things, because that creates stagnation. And we are always changing, we are always evolving. Things are always coming and going. People are always coming and going. Places are always coming and going. We have to learn how to be non-attached, because there is no loss in the fifth dimension. There's no separation, none of that. And so that is something that we are going to be anchoring in and working through. And so these are important to know. Again, you can look at the guide if you want to use these for affirmations, if there's ones you're specifically working to anchor in. But the balanced harmonics is going to also translate to many other aspects of our life, which I will do separate videos on. One is the art of giving and receiving, right? Masculine, feminine. We have totally lost the art of giving and receiving. We've been living in a taking and hoarding paradigm. So I'm going to do a different video on that, because it's really important for us to understand, because the fifth dimension is all about unlimited giving and receiving, right? Equal energy exchange. And that's going to be something that we have to familiarize ourselves with and start practicing. That's a part of balanced harmonics. This is just our inner selves. Then there's the art of being and doing, right? Being feminine, doing masculine, and learning how that flows. How do we know when is the time to be, and when is the time to go within, and when is the time to do? And that's an important flow for us as well. Again, these are all going to kind of come in organically, but it's good for us to understand them. So there's so many different ways, and the way that we express and communicate is also going to change. Because the way we express and the way we communicate has been programmed. So we're going to relearn that art as well. So for the balanced harmonics, if you're focusing on anchoring these things in, don't get too caught up in trying to figure out anything, like, oh, what traits am I not embodying? And don't get too over focused on it. It is a very natural process. If you're really working on your embodiment, focus on the self-love disciplines 100%. Be aware of the core programmings that you have, and use the divine traits as part of your I am affirmations of your spiritual disciplines. And it is an organic process. doesn't need to be, you don't have to try at this. This is just an organic process. And yes, things will come up that you'll be tested on. Yes, it will bring up things for you to process, transform, etc. But it's not something that you have to figure out how to do this or how to be this, because you naturally are it. We're taking layers off. We're not actually trying to become something. We're trying to remember what we already are. So thank you guys for sharing. And if there's any questions, feel free to comment. And if you would like the additional resources, please go to our home website at 5dfulldisclosure.org. And I will be back soon.